Hello, and welcome to the Education Reformation, where it's our job to discover where education ought to go and how we might be able to get it there. Here we go. So in this first episode, and since Dreya and I are both a little bit shy, we decided to kick this off with a little bit of social enhancement. Throughout, we actually got a little bit too far into the bottle and started rambling a good bit, but it was still a really fun conversation. In the future, we'll be taking ourselves much more seriously. So here goes nothing. Enjoy. So, I'm going to do a little, intro dealio.
Okay.
And just kind of, talk briefly about what the show's going to be. And then go from there. I'll probably go back and, turn all this shit off. Or use it in, future episodes when people are like, I wonder what they were like when they first started podcasting.
The very first podcast,
well, there was definitely whiskey involved.
It started with a cheers and ended with a holla.
What is that from? Oh, Jesus. That sounds so much like a quote.
It's an original Dreya. Cool.
Alright, I think I have enough whiskey. So this is the Education Reformation, where we, primarily me, are going to discuss where education ought to go and how we want to get it there. Or how we can get it there as a society overall. Because there's a problem, right? In education in general, we know that something's wrong with it, but it seems like not many people are really talking about it. There are scientists who do very specific work, but it's not a topic of conversation. In the public sphere, we'll talk about gay marriage or abortion or all these other gun laws, all these other issues, but education is not really one that comes up in popular conversation very often. And a big part of the issue is that our system is very clearly not optimized in any way. And I'm actually kind of worried about it. Not for me, because by the time I'm dead, it's not going to be a big deal, but moving forward, I think things are going to go downhill pretty quick if we don't get our education system together. So that's mainly what this podcast is going to be about overall. I think I want to have some guests on too, like Whitney. I'd like to see if she can come on and just have a conversation about what she thinks, because she's actually educated on the topic.
In a very particular category of
teacher. Yeah. And she also teaches at a small school, which is interesting because her class size is tiny compared to any major university. So she gets to work really intimately with all of her students, and especially in the outdoors region, they rely on each other for food and shit. So
right. Take your trail, buddy.
For those of you who are offended by, or for those of you who might be listening that are offended by severe language, we probably will use quite a bit of language.
Tune out now.
Yeah, so if you're offended, this might not be the podcast for you, because
find another channel.
We believe in semantic relativity here.
Radical free speech, including profanity in all its glory, and catharsis. Catharsis? It's catharsis. That's the word.
So, I'm reading off an outline, so if this first episode seems a little forced, hopefully you guys won't mind. Me and Dreya are just here having fun. So, before we get into the meat, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself, And do you want me to introduce you or? Okay, cool. She nodded yes. So that
was my free speech.
My name's Taylor Spence, and you'll hear more about me throughout the series or whatnot. I'll probably talk a lot about my education specifically for this podcast, but currently I work in a sales position in the family business. I have an extremely diverse amount of interests. I have diverse interests. And I'm probably going to be doing a podcast on a lot of them. So if you like what you're hearing so far, which you probably won't, but, the 3 people that are going to enjoy this.
It's the thought that counts.
Should tune in the future.
We're doing it for us anyway.
There will be more in the future. And then sitting across from me in our cute little house is my wonderful and beautiful girlfriend, Dreya, who is incredibly intelligent and works as a massage therapist, is very much a, physical person, and maybe even a little bit of maybe like a physical intellectualist.
Somatic psychology and whatnot.
Yeah. Shit like that. So that's who we are.
Hello.
Greetings to my little blue snowball mic.
Holla. Yeah, it looks kind of like Eva from WALL-E.
Right, yeah. I always look at it and think the exact same thing.
WALL-E.
So there will probably be some Disney references in here.
Unrelated.
I haven't come up with a name for the show yet.
Oh.
So you might have to help me with that, but
I'm good at naming things.
I like the Education Reformation. Like #ER. I thought that would be cool. #the ER.
ER is pretty popular already. You might get like some hospital related.
Oh, that's true.
Interest.
Yeah.
What if you did like the Education Renaissance? Because that was like a remaking of all concepts and ideas and.
Yeah. I like how much closer Reformation is to like reforming. Because that's really what it's about, right? The podcast is going to be about taking the education system, which we know is like inherently flawed in some way.
Yeah, but don't you want to tear it down? Start over?
Well, no. See, that's the thing, is I don't necessarily want to tear down the education system.
An excellent segues into the first point.
Bum, ba-da-bum. Actually, the first point is about science. Because, so also, by the way, for those of you listening, we are a little bit drunk. So if this rambles on a little bit, you'll have to excuse us and just deal with it.
It's my Friday night.
Oh, this is the first episode. We're just goofing off.
Because my work schedule's odd.
As a massage therapist. I like to work Mondays from 6 to 8 a.m. and Fridays from 11 to midnight.
Thank you and good night.
Okay.
Alright.
Focus.
Recentering.
The point that I have written down is actually the science of education. And that's all I have for the outline. But
That's helpful.
Well, it is helpful because I know what it means.
Oh.
So a big part of the issue with the education system right now, which we know, everybody understands that clearly the public education system is not as effective as it could be. Right? It's not optimal.
Everybody's got their complaints.
Yeah, and teachers, administrators, students,
TAs,
and from kindergarten all the way up through, even graduate and postgraduate studies in college or at university. We know that the system has major flaws in it, but we're not working through that. So the science of education is not really being done, from what I can tell. And I'm sure there's people out there who are doing some science in regards to pedagogy in general.
You mean science is in studies to determine what teaching methods there are and how our brains learn?
Right. So psychologists understand a lot about how our brains learn. But the issue is that that's not really being applied in the classroom. So people like Tim Ferriss or these big names who are into A/B testing and kind of doing science with a sample group of only themselves, they're doing some of this science, and they could potentially help to, say, teach a meta-learning class where you teach about teaching. For those of you who don't know what meta means, which probably aren't going to be very many people who would listen to me talk. And
plus, even if they were listening, they're not now.
Right.
Condescending.
In case you're stupid.
What was that? Sarah Silverman?
Yeah.
She said post-coital or after sex if you're stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Oh, we shouldn't tell comedy bits on here, because what if somebody hasn't seen it yet? That'll ruin the bit for them, right?
I don't know if I'm willing to get that aware.
Okay, cool. Well, especially like 2 glasses of wine in.
Yeah, if I'm like doing a Gilmore Girls podcast, like throwing spoilers around, then you can, yeah. But if we're like talking about education and I'm like, oh,
So basically the whole thing is that we don't test shit. And I don't really know why that is. Again, I understand that the system at large is kind of a like pantheon of bureaucracy, and it can be kind of hard to like move or shift, but that should change. There's no reason that it should be that difficult to move or shift, right?
Right.
So we should be able to, say, test and then implement things very rapidly, especially in today's, technological climate. I mean, we have the internet. There's no reason that we can't, like, share information between schools or be significantly more connected in the sense that we can understand how all of that stuff works. So.
Well, along that same vein, or maybe not, it just popped in my head, but I was thinking about...
Go for it, babe. That's why I've got you on here.
You said the science of learning, and psychologists know what it is, and that means that there are most definitely teachers that have a specific learning style that they prefer. Just like I have a particular modality as a massage therapist that I enjoy implementing, I'm sure they as well have a particular method of teaching, but the standardized learning and testing does not allow for any individuality among the teachers' learning.
Exactly. Which is an interesting question, right? Because we have to have standards because we want to be able to certify that you've learned shit while you're at school, and make sure that the teachers are
people to go up in grades. So you have to be some way to
rank
them. Like in games, there's point levels.
Exactly, yeah. What level paladin are you or whatever?
There's the rep that we get for being awesome.
And then the teachers, we have to make sure that the teachers are doing their jobs too, right? Because if you get tenure as a teacher and you slack off...
Teachers are like, well, that's that.
Right. So I'm actually thinking about doing an episode in the distant future.
This is just about tenure. But on the flip side, I do want to put in a word for those teachers that get tenure and then continue to work their asses off because they want to earn it. You know, every time you hear tenure brought up, you're like, oh, that lazy tenured. But just for the people out there that do care about being tenured.
Like, there are some teachers who are just so passionate about what they do. And simultaneously, there's teachers who are tenured in, and they're like, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm gonna do whatever.
I tried for 20 years, so I wouldn't have to try from here on out.
Right.
You'll understand one day.
But, I was actually thinking about, I'm going to start doing that Robin Scherbatsky thing. Doing the
butt. We could do the drinking game tonight.
Okay. So I said it, but I have to drink now.
Uh-huh.
But won't that make me butt worse? That's okay. So I was thinking about doing a podcast or a episode on this podcast in the future about the economics of education in general. So, and maybe this is going to end up being a series of like 5 or 10 episodes about the economics of education, where we just jump into like teachers unions or like where the funding comes from for collegiate areas of education, like the higher levels of education. Where does that funding come from? who actually pays for it, student loan debt, and get into where the money's at in education. Because I think that private education is going to be something that's very serious in the future. It's going to grow a lot. But anyway, I'm kind of getting off topic. And the cat's actually distracting me.
I know.
Do you want to go feed them real quick?
Yeah, I'll go feed them real quick.
Sorry for the interruption, folks.
Definitely.
So, while she's gone, I'm just going to keep talking. So why I'm doing this podcast is because there's really a point to it all. And the importance of education is absolutely significant. Education is essentially the linchpin of our entire culture. Anything that we want to progress in society, or if we want to progress our society, education is a good way to do that. Our entire human culture is essentially built on that ability to remember things and then improve upon them. And without that, we would have never developed tools or anything like that, and therefore would never, I wouldn't be podcasting to you right now. I'd be trying to kill something and eat it exclusively. So that's kind of the why behind this podcast. We're going to move on to, let's see, I'm looking at my notes because this is the first podcast I've ever actually done. I want to make sure that in my drunken stupor. Oh, Jesus.
I'm back.
I was just telling them that I want to make sure that in my drunken stupor I don't ramble on about something random for too long.
He says drunken stupor. He's not actually drunk. Our level of drunk is where...
I've had 6 shots of whiskey.
Oh, maybe he is drunk. I'm not drunk.
She's not drunk, but she's acting like it. Okay, so the next big question is... Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna do a deviation here. So throughout this podcast, you'll notice that primarily what I'm going to be doing is actually educating myself a lot. I have tons of thoughts and opinions about how things could maybe change for the better, and you'll definitely be hearing those as well. But I'm going to try to ask some people who actually know what the fuck they're talking about. We mentioned earlier my friend Whitney. She happens to teach locally here where we live, and is a friend of a friend. And she's incredibly intelligent. So I'm hoping to kind of start with her and work my way out from there. Maybe talk to some other people at North Greenville. And eventually I'd like to interview everybody from professors to students, maybe even have a couple children on. I think that would be cool. If I invite a friend's child or something, and maybe Madison can come in and talk to us about her opinion in regards to school and stuff like
cool
that.
To get a current perspective on what it's like, because we know what it was like when we went through, but it could be it's way different from our parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's way different now, and we're we need to fix this problem. Well, yeah. We don't want to be the next inflexible generation that's not willing to talk to the younger generation to figure out what's actually going on, so we can figure out how to bind everyone together rather
Absolutely.
than layering people.
Yeah. So in admitting that I don't know anything about education really, I came up with the question what gives me the right to talk about education? Because obviously, there are people who devote their entire lives to educating people, right? Miss Suzette or whoever has taught school for 45 years and doesn't want to give it up because she knows it's important. She understands it's important. But she might not even be the best person to be teaching our kids, regardless of whether or not she's done it for a long time. So here's a couple of reasons why I have the right to talk about education. I'm smart. That's the first one. Or I think I'm intelligent. This is probably a subject that's up for debate. I said, He says as he continues to get drunker. But more importantly than the fact that I think I'm intelligent, I've been actually deeply dissatisfied with my own education.
Hear, hear.
Right? Because, I mean, I've gotten to be, I'm 28 years old and really haven't even decided what I want to do with my life yet. And my education...
Really? I already fed you, ignoring you now.
Can you move that off the table? Okay, cool. Sorry, we've got vibrating phones and stuff. We don't want to... And the cats aren't helping either.
Consider this an auditory rough draft.
We want you to be here with us. That's why we leave the phones on the table and the cats in the background. Oh, we forgot to put on music. We're going to put on music for this.
All right.
We'll do it next episode, unless you just want
it. Put it on the background.
Okay, cool. We want to make sure it's not too loud though, right? Okay, cool. So, the direction of my life has not really trended in the same area that I thought I was going to be in. Because in college I was studying, to begin with, business, and then I had a college, existential crisis and decided to study linguistics with very little forethought into what kind of career linguists actually have, which is not really any at all. There aren't many jobs in linguistics.
Unless you're going to be a translator, which, as it turns out, I looked into it, it's very difficult to be a translator who's born in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, my sister, Kelly, she was going to give that a whirl. She actually studied abroad in Japan for that
that's
semester.
really interesting.
She was going to, I forget the name of the program, but she was going to go live in Japan but be teaching English.
Right.
And then after that, she was looking into, what it would be like to be like a translator. She was actually looking into translating Japanese shows because they have the subtitles.
Right, yeah.
So she would just be watching anime for her job and just be
that'd be pretty cool.
Translating. I was like, that's so awesome. And then she started looking into it, and it was if English is your first language, it's exponentially more difficult to get a slot somehow.
Huh. Yeah. Interesting.
So linguistics, if you weren't going to be a translator, then.
Let's go on this tangent.
Sure.
That's actually really interesting because Japanese is kind of iconically difficult for English speakers.
Oh yeah, even I call her Jelly. So if I ever say Jelly, I'm talking about my sister Kelly. Her name is Jessica. Her middle name is Kelly, but Renaissance transmission, I'll call her Jelly. Just go with it.
Okay, I'm sure people will get to kind of know us as we do these episodes and whatnot.
But
you're talking about translation in Japanese. Oh, I was talking about translation in Japanese.
Yeah, you said something very difficult on Jelly.
So English is actually a very rhotic language.
Oh, you said it was really difficult. Japanese is iconically difficult. And Jelly, she is wicked smart, and she said the same thing.
Yeah.
She's like, that's the reason I chose it, actually. Because she's
really?
I'm so bored all the time. I want to actually be challenged. And she's like, and this did the trick because there's the spoken part, and then there's the written part. But there's apparently 5 different and a kanji is their alphabet. They have 5 different alphabets.
Yeah, and not just kanji. They have kanji as one of their alphabets, sort of.
Yeah.
It's like a set of
words
characters
in there that had syllables. I don't remember all of them, but it was very intricate.
Well, it's actually not even that stuff is difficult. So, if you were going to say learn Mandarin, Chinese.
With the meow.
Yeah, this tone, right?
Yeah.
If you were going to learn Mandarin, their character system is significantly more difficult than Japanese. Because Japanese, you can actually learn a very small set of characters and generally get along just fine.
That's what she did.
Right. That's what most people who are really apt at learning would go about doing, which is great to think about education. There's people who are really good at learning education or learning languages, and the reason they're good at that is because they understand the system by which they can comprehend it.
They can synthesize massive amounts of information and get to this concise here.
Right, exactly. So that's actually not even the issue with Japanese. So, for example, English is actually a very rhotic language, RHOTIC. RHOTI. Yeah, I'm spelling that right. Which means there's a lot of R's, that sound is not a sound that most Asian speakers use.
Is that what they mean when they say that American English speaking people, it's at the front of their mouth? The sounds? Because I've heard foreign people say that the way we speak is very
located in the front of the mouth. Yeah.
Very what's that with the guitar? Resonant or well-rounded, full body.
Oh yeah, people might be talking about that because we do use a lot of glides and we use a lot of liquids. Liquids are R's and L's, right? We have things like velarized. This is probably a little bit heady, but
I'm interested.
This is my topic, so this is kind of like a pet topic for me. So like the word waffle, when you would transcribe that in the International Phonetic Alphabet, IPA, for those who are listening, you would have waff, right? That's one syllable. But then you have a single sound that creates the last syllable, and that's just an ol. That's what it sounds like. Ol, waff, ol. And that's velarized, is what they call it. But it's also what they call a syllabic consonant. It's a consonant, not a vowel, right? That, I think I'm drunk, so I'm over-explaining things. I have a tendency to over-explain.
Uh-huh.
This is interesting. This is going to be a cool experiment. I really like doing this already. We could do this every night and just have a really cool relationship where we just hang out and talk on the radio.
We get to know each other.
Yeah,
better,
yeah.
Yeah. Shut up, Dad. Get over yourself. You've already had dinner and you were so spoiled you don't even know it. I'll try not to scream and just...
Yeah, that's okay. That mic's actually, I'll tell you about that later. You can pretty much scream into that mic. You're fine. We're not, I'm watching the thing. We're not redlining at all. We're not even close.
Okay, good.
So you're good on volume. That's why I'm speaking normally. I'm sorry, I'm speaking louder than normal. So.
You were talking about waffle.
Yeah, so waffle. In a lot of Asian languages, they don't have that lateral liquid, the L. They only have, what's it called? They only have R's, basically. I can't remember the name for it right now, but I think that's the whiskey being a problem. Yeah, they don't have R's, right? Or, I'm sorry, they don't have L's, they have R's. And in their ear, it sounds the same to them. Which is really interesting.
Oh,
so,
yeah, I
for
read an
instance,
article on that.
We're from the South, right? So, a pen that you write with, we actually say that the exact same as a pen that you would stick in your clothing. Mm-hmm. Or stick through some fabric. But in other regions of English-speaking countries, they actually distinguish that. And you can hear the difference, right? It's pen versus pen. Which I have a little bit of a trouble saying it still. Even after all
What do you mean, pen versus pen?
So it's pen versus pen. You hear the difference?
No.
That's exactly my point.
You're just saying the same word, one slower.
I'd be interested if we had comments or something where people are like, "Oh my god, I can totally hear the difference." That'd be really cool. So anyway, that's actually really interesting that Jelly was talking about Japanese being a hard thing to get that as a translator, because actually as an English teacher, American students are super viable because we're native speakers, right? And in the teaching English as a second language or teaching English to speakers of other languages, that's TESOL, they really like to have native speakers so they can work on idioms and things that other people wouldn't know. Like if you are from, say, Venezuela and you move to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and you go to a convenience store and ring up your Coke and your peanuts or whatever, and the lady at the counter says, "That'll be $5.10," you're not going to have any idea what she's saying if you're native to Venezuela and maybe don't speak English as well as you would like. And that's actually a specific scenario that a professor of mine had. And it was so funny to listen to him. He's a native Spanish speaker from Venezuela. and a linguistics professor, and he would do impressions of different accents, which was hilarious to hear him do in his Spanish accent.
Right.
Where he would say 510, and he would try to like have the southern draw on it.
That'd be interesting.
And the other one that he would do is actually Cockney English. It was a region of England, right? Or Great Britain, I guess. Great Britain. That's not good. We're starting to slur words. Where he would say the word caught. He would say caught. He would be like very caught. Because their vowels are further back in their mouth. So he would try to impersonate them, but he was really awful at it because he spoke Spanish, which, as you were saying earlier, is actually a specific language that happens in the front of your mouth.
That's the language I was learning.
Yeah, so they use like interdentals a lot.
Oh no, it was Russian.
Yeah, Russian to me sounds a lot like Spanish, actually.
Very much in the front.
Russian sounds like if they came up with Spanish in Asia, that would be Russian.
Здравствуйте.
Like something about the phonetics of it sounds very Spanish and very Asian to me at the same time.
They even do like they mostly move their lips. Like some people move their jaws. Like
Mm-hmm.
But with the Russian they just they don't even.
Yeah. They actually, the reason it sounds like that to you is because their tongue is closer to the roof of their mouth. They have palatal glides, like yeah. So anyway, okay. So education.
Distraction.
Let's see. How much time are we looking at?
We went
here?
on a tangent on.
Sweet.
Japan.
We're only at 30 minutes. I'm okay with making like 3-hour podcasts.
Go back just a little bit because I had you teased a thought somewhere in there when you were talking about the Japanese and the translation. And
I talked about T-Sol. I'll tell you what, I'm going to keep talking.
Yeah.
And if you think of it, we'll go back to it. Just so there's not like this long period of silence where we're trying to think of what the fuck we were talking about. Okay. Oh, I think I'm going to record like a cool, like intro song. Just using my own voice.
Yeah.
Like that, did I show you that song on SoundCloud that was about Emerson?
Yeah, you did.
Where I was doing like little beats and I had like taken, I'm going to do something like that for the podcast.
That'd be cool.
Okay, so what gives me the right? We already talked about that.
Good,
okay,
smart.
so I've actually been interested in education in general for really quite some time. Like,
He's going to be a professor someday.
When I was in college, that was kind of like my goal. I wanted to be a professor. But I'm not very good at staying on track on goals. And I flunked the GRE because it was silly to me. I just didn't, my brain doesn't line up with standardized testing very well. Right. She flunked the GRE?
I don't know. She didn't flunk it. She made like a score the first time and she was like,
yeah, that's pretty much what I did.
But when she was looking over the study guide, she was like, this is absurd. Like, I didn't even learn this when I was in school. Like, how could they be testing me on this?
The thing that drives me, well, okay, I'll rant about the GRE some other time when we talk about standardized testing. So I've actually been really interested in education in general for a while, but, and I've looked at maybe becoming a teacher, maybe in elementary school or high school, or eventually becoming a professor at a very prestigious university one day. Because that's really the age category that I would like, with a monocle and everything. That's really the age category I'd like to work with, though. It's like 18 to 21 area.
Get their minds while they're malleable.
Right. Well, actually kind of after they're malleable. Because after you start to cease to be malleable, that's when I really can challenge you. Like, okay, you've started to solidify your beliefs about the world. Let's break those down a little bit so that you can reform them more accurately. Or more effectively.
Okay, I'm just going to say right now that whatever you were thinking when you were 18 and whatever I was thinking when I was 18, I guarantee you it is not what most of the people around us were thinking.
True.
So, what was the phrase you just used?
Malleable?
No, the formed world views and opinions.
Yeah.
I wouldn't overestimate so many of those 18-year-olds.
Well, to be honest, I think that many of them have formed worldviews by then. They just don't understand it.
I think they've formed social views. I don't know about world. Well,
I want to do a podcast about an episode about curriculum as well. So let's say this topic. You'll remember this, but I won't. So
we could write it down.
Okay. What was I saying?
We were gonna do
I want to do an episode about curriculum. Yeah. Okay. So I thought about becoming a teacher or becoming maybe even an administrator, like a principal or whatnot.
I was about to be like, I'm not drunk. Look how clear that is. It's a perfect
I don't know. That looks like kind of. I don't know. That's pretty sketchy.
What are you talking about?
It's kind of like.
It's perfectly straight.
It goes. No, I'm just fucking with you. Yeah, so I'd like to do an episode on curriculum. And I thought about becoming a teacher or an administrator at some point, but the reason that I wanted to become would you stop it? The reason I wanted to become a teacher or an administrator, people are shutting that podcast off right now, is because I really want to affect change on the education system, right? But I don't actually think that being a teacher or an administrator is a really good way to do that. So as I was listening to a podcast that I listen to regularly, which is Joe Rogan's podcast. If you haven't checked him out, you need to, because they have some awesome conversations on there. Shout out to Joe Rogan. Give me a call, buddy. I'll really cross my fingers. But anyway, I can't affect change from the position of being a teacher or an administrator. So I was like, well, how do I do this? If I really wanted to make some change happen in the education system, really the best way to do it is to be very vocal. In today's political climate, bureaucratic climate, really just the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak. So that's the primary reason for us doing this podcast, where we ramble on about random shit while we're intoxicated. So, I want to continue, or rather wrap this up probably, by saying that this podcast is primarily intended to be thought-provoking and maybe inspiring and maybe even a bit convicting for teachers and administrators and students out there who, in their current space, due to the chaos of life and the entropy of the universe, don't understand how significant education actually is. So, in order to kind of conclude this first very chaotic episode, I want to talk a little bit about how I feel about education as being important. So, I really do think that education is the cornerstone of our society in general. And we may have different goals in life, or maybe we wake up every day for vastly different reasons, but personally I think that the whole purpose of this human experience is really to advance our species. Some people believe in God, some people don't, and some people have some confusion around what their purpose really is. And I think, personally, that our purpose in life is to advance our species. It's to look out for our species and move it forward, to have the most good or the most positive experience for the most number of people possible. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I really think that education is the key to that. Just in the same way, you might, I don't know if I've talked to you about objective morality or anything, but Sam Harris has the Waking Up podcast, and he talks about objective morality in a couple different speeches that he gives, or talks that he gives at different universities and whatnot. And I think his approach to morality could be applied to education as well, as there are peaks and there are valleys. And some things are really good to do in education, in teaching people how to go about life, or teaching people certain topics, or really just putting people through what we kind of define as school. There are definitely better ways to do it, and there are definitely ways that are not as good to do it, or not as effective, right? So going forward, I really think we should be optimizing that and actually pushing education forward. So, summarizing, this whole podcast is, if we're really experimenting with society, culture, and politics, and truth, and granted that's a pretty big if, right? Like, I'm kind of defining everyone's purpose right now, but assuming those things, we really need to be taking education in general a lot more seriously than we currently are in the political or popular sphere. So, moving forward, that's what this podcast is going to be about. We're going to try and be relaxed about it and have some fun along the way, but we want to implant in your mind the idea of education. So, if you're a teacher, or you're a student, or you're an administrator, or you're a politician, if you're interested in any way in the philosophy of education, or pedagogy in general, or even just the advancement of human civilization, this is hopefully going to be a really good podcast for you.
Prepare to be incepted.
Yeah, we're going to try and incept you with our own ideas and get you to, like, teach evolution in elementary school and stuff. That's crazy.
One question. What is that P word that you keep repeating?
Pedagogy. So, pedagogy. Here, let me, I'm going to look it up on the computer so that I can give you an accurate definition. So give me a moment. What do you think about what I've said so far? Has this, been educational or helpful?
Well, I think simply because this is the first test run, this was probably, it's like if we were a baby deer and we tried to stand up on an ice pond. I think that's probably about what this podcast was like, but I don't think this was necessarily about getting the point across, because you need several podcasts and essentially time in order to incept or get any concept or idea across, but we've certainly introduced ourselves, and I think even if we didn't get through any substantial content, like ours was more philosophical or quandary.
Yeah.
We at least introduced our voice and the way in which we will be thinking and talking and musing about these things.
Yeah. Musing is a really good word for what I think that we'll end up doing.
Yeah. Because we started this as a journal for ourselves.
Yeah,
it hurts your hand to journal, and you don't want to type because it's really impersonal. And so now it's really easy to have a podcast, and we have a lot of thoughts and worries and concerns and issues that we need to get off of our chests and out of our heads so that we can continue with our everyday life to deal with the never-ending stream of issues and concepts and bills, and sometimes you butt up against the circumstance and you're just so frustrated with it that you can't get past it and you need a little help, and sometimes you need to talk, and even if no one's listening, it's nice to be able to talk about it.
Yeah. So at the very least, this is therapeutic for us.
So we're trying to make a podcast, but essentially, and first and foremost, this was for us.
Right.
So we apologize for the blundering on the first, but sorry, not sorry, because you know how it is. You live life too. It's all about your life and what's going on. So. Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to help a little bit with that. I'm hoping that 20 years down the road, people look back at this podcast and they're like, maybe these guys are like Dreya and Taylor are a little bit ditzy or a little bit stupid,
a little bit millennial-ish.
Yeah, like they kind of rant and rave a little bit and go off on crazy tangents.
Like they have feet in their mouth.
But they had some interesting ideas that led to other interesting ideas, and that would be worth it for me. I mean,
whatever they preface it with, they're going to have their opinions or judgments or whatever you want to call them, but they're going to be like, oh, blah, 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 Dreya and Taylor, but they really got me interested in this, or they really made a good point, or I was really interested, you know, like whatever. Yeah. That's all we're looking for, is for someone to be like, oh, because of this thing. And it's really easy to do. Like, you can come across a random cat video on Facebook and be like, oh, it changed my day. Like, you know, you can just, you're in that bad mood and you see it and it makes you laugh. And just because that video happened in that moment that you were having that day, it becomes like a really important thing to you. But it's not necessarily because it's particularly sparkling. Like, it's not necessarily dazzling or significant in that way. It's just, it's exactly what you needed to see or hear. And maybe someday we can say something that can be that for you.
Yeah. And also, we're going to have people on the podcast who actually know what you're talking about. So we'll get to just, like, ask them questions and shit. And
yeah, this was also, like, an education. Like, either one of us, like, if we talked about, like, trail building or massage therapy or psychology, but we for whatever reason, we chose the first one to be, like, education. What do you think?
It's because I'm really passionate about education. I really am. I love education. I think it's incredibly important. So anyway, to wrap up,
not to belittle,
we are going to define, for those of you who don't understand the definition of the word pedagogy.
Oh, there it is, yeah.
It is a noun, pedagogy. Plural noun would be pedagogies. Mm-hmm. Or pedagogies. I said it kind of weird. It is the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept.
Gotcha.
Quote, the relationship between applied linguistics and language pedagogy.
So it's kind of like the logistics of language.
It's the study of education, essentially. It's the study of, like, teaching to someone.
And learning.
Yeah.
Gotcha. I didn't know what that word meant, so.
No, that's exact. See, that's why I have you here. It's because sometimes I whip out a word and I don't understand that maybe people on the other end of this mic don't understand what I'm talking about.
Like, I'm pretty smart. I just was not in linguistics, so I don't know what pedagogy means.
Yeah. And also, we probably both sound like rednecks, and that's because we are.
We are from the South.
Woot woot!
Yeah, I'm from a little town that nobody knows. If you're, it's like on Pirates of the Caribbean, the islands you can only find if you've been there. If someone's been where I'm from, then they know. Otherwise, they're like, where?
Did you meet somebody that was, like, from Canton?
From Bethel.
From Bethel, yeah.
Straight up Bethel. Yeah.
I don't remember who that was right now. But we need to stop rambling. Folks, I hope you've enjoyed this. Future episodes will not be this rambling and tangential.
Much more clear and concise.
Because I'll probably do them when I'm a little bit more sober.
We were honestly just seeing if we could make it through.
We might be about to record another one. I don't know. We'll see. So, anyway, you guys have a good night.
Thanks for listening.
I hope you enjoyed it.
See you later.